أهلا وسهلا بكم جميعا في الجلسة الثانية.
We welcome you all in the second session of our scientific symposium regarding the Palestinian agriculture, food security, and incomes in the context of genocide. This session highlights the main challenges that are facing the relief and recovery phase and how can food security and agriculture be factors of success. I would like to call upon Mr. Mazen Sonnokrut, a board member of MAS, to be the facilitator, and Mr. Al Butme from Ms. Butme from Birzeit University, who has prepared this research paper. We'd also would like to welcome Mr. Jomo from Columbia University, and he's an assistant professor at Malaysian University, who's going to also comment on this paper. We would hope that his comments would enrich this dialogue and also create a better understanding of the challenges that we face and open new ways and venues for prosperity despite this dire situation that we're living with. Now we'll start with Mr. Mazen Sunnokrat. Thank you, and we wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you. We welcome all attendees with all protocols observed. We thank MAS because we're a family. We're proud of this family of MAS, and hopefully it would stay. And hopefully this would continue to provide visions and with all the stakeholders in and out of Palestine. That MAS has such a significant role, and hopefully their vision and mission would continue to be long-standing. And we are happy to have Dr. Nabil and Dr. Raja and everyone working and all the researchers of this institute. In terms of agriculture and food security, Dr. Samia and I were discussing this. This is the topic of the season now, and it's not just something to brush upon. We understand how important it is in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and in marginalized areas, in the rural areas, especially areas C. We know the food basket and how it affects the situation. As you all know, the very first military decision was to conquer the water resources. The very first military decision taken in 1967 was to conquer the water resources. Ever since, we have been suffering, and that was one of the objectives of conquering the water resources. And then the joint committee that hasn't met for the last 14 years, they have insisted that water should be included on the topics, and there's no patriotic person or any Palestinian person would not accept to do so. We're talking about the economy despite the ongoing war, and this is no exceptional, but it's even beyond exceptional. Israel has and is continuing to wage 4 types of war: the military war, which is conventional, using all types of weaponry. The second is famine, putting the Palestinian people under famine, and that's one of the major weapons. The very first, we're talking about 52 bakeries which were demolished and destructed immediately at the beginning of the war. The third weapon is medicine and destructing hospitals and targeting ambulances and medical teams. And the fourth, which is probably intangible, however, it's the psychological war waged on Palestinian people through displacement, where the one family would have to be displaced 7 to 8 times within 14. Some have actually been displaced 14 times and more. And this is a psychological war, and it's actually systemized to destruct people's psycho, and it has ramifications on the people and anyone who's trying to help the Palestinian people. In terms of agriculture that we would like to address today, and we thank Dr. Samia for preparing this research paper. I'm honored to have read the papers, especially that I'm one of the investors in this sector. And there's an initiative by the Palestinian government on food security, which included four uh, aspects. The Ministry of Agriculture, in cooperation with their staff and the cabinet. This includes provision of productive, which provide or which fill the basket, the Palestinian agriculture basket, including livestock, fruits and vegetables. And this is how to activate and how to expand this. And we're going to discuss that in detail. The second issue in terms of rainfall and how to, or water cisterns or wastewater and how to treat it. And that's very important for development and food security. The third is relevant to environment and rainforests. And I understand the sound is muffled. And helping those who have been targeted by Israeli settlers, especially in the West Bank. And I can't hear clearly, the voice is muffled. Sure, we don't want to disfragment all the efforts that we have. We want to make sure that we're all working as one hand, because this is a joint effort to ensure that we would be able to implement this as soon as possible. When we all work on the same page, that means we're going to get there sooner, faster, and more efficiently and effectively at the end. I would like to say that the latest news now, or the trend, is we talked about tourism and other aspects, but agriculture is linked to the dignity of people and land. Dr. Samia, for those who don't know her, she is a professor at the economy department in Bir Zayed. She has several researches. She has participated with mass in the culture sector. Moving towards this session, where we're here to shed a light on economic topics. The very first paper that I'm going to present is focusing on the agriculture sector, food security, and incomes. This paper includes several topics that what I'm going to focus on are three main factors. The overall situation relevant to agriculture, food security, and incomes, what happened during the last period. And then I'm going to move towards the challenges that are faced. And finally, to conclude with what could we develop in terms of policies and interventions that would help secure the food security and expanding agriculture, as well as improving incomes for residents, whether that's in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip. Let's move the slide, please. Briefly, we have a whole large amount of statistics, observations, whether it's from media outlets or research or literature reviews about what's going on in Gaza. Regarding agriculture, in a nutshell, what happened is full devastation and destruction of the agricultural sector and the agricultural lands, including about 70% of this sector. Not only full destruction of the agricultural land through bombing them and through destruction, but also through using weapons which are banned internationally. This destruction included also the infrastructure of agriculture. It included the farms, included the equipment, included even a human capacity that were conducting the cultivation. As for the West Bank, this systematic uprooting is continuing through confiscation of land, limiting the usage of water, uprooting trees, preventing farmers from accessing their land. All these details have fully disrupted the agricultural sector at a large scale. In terms of food security, as you all know, food security in Gaza is nowhere to be found in Gaza. Gaza is relying, it has and continue to be on, or Gaza relies, has been relying and is continuing to rely on the international aid. So access, Gaza is now becoming an area where lacks food security totally. The overall estimations from various organizations, they state that prior to the war on Gaza, this genocide war on Gaza, Gaza used to have about, on average, every 3 hours, one truck would enter Gaza. However, now the amount that's accessing Gaza only serves 2% of the actual need of Palestinian people in Gaza. So that means that there's no food security in Gaza at all. The destruction of the agricultural sector and the food security, and here we have to identify what do we mean by food security. Food security means the access, people's access to healthy food, which allows them to fulfill their needs. What happened in Gaza and the West Bank due to the devastation of the agricultural sector, we had an escalation of poverty and also famine. So currently in Gaza, according to the World Food Organization, a quarter of the Palestinian people in Gaza are facing famine, and everyone is facing a lack of food security. But at least a quarter of them are at the verge of famine, which means it's at the highest level of food insecurity. And based on that, the poverty has risen. According to statistics, it reached that poverty has reached 100% of poverty. So people are living under the line of poverty overall. The expectations by the end of this year, 70% of the West Bank residents in Gaza, Afghan Gazans, would be registered as poor. The current status shows all the details and statistics. Now we'll move towards the main challenges to relief, rehabilitation, and recovery and reconstruction. The very first challenge that we face in terms of agriculture is the destruction of the whole agriculture sector. So the agriculture has been targeted since 1967. It's not a recent thing. It used to comprise 75% of the Palestinian income. It only contributes 60% to the Palestinian economy. And the reasons are clear. They are directly relevant to confiscation of land, limited usage of water, preventing farmers and agriculturers from accessing their land. And these are Israeli systematic policies that were targeting the agriculture, the Palestinian agriculture, and notably, the agriculture contributes. The Palestinian agriculture contributes to operating the labor force, and therefore it contributes to the income of residents. However, it has been targeted severely. The second challenge is the Palestinian authorities' policies relevant to agriculture. The Palestinian agriculture has been marginalized for various reasons. The most important reason that led to lack of investment to agriculture is the stance that the international community took towards agriculture, considering that the productivity of this sector is low. As you well know, when you know that productivity is low, then you should not invest, or it's not likely to invest in it because the return on investment would be quite low. And this is what happened in terms of the agricultural sector. And I remember about 20 years ago at Mass, we have discussed this um, with international organizations to invest in the agriculture sector. From us as Palestinian economists, we said that the agricultural sector is not an economic sector, it's an economic, social, and political sector. For the occupation revolves around the agricultural sector, and it's all about land to begin with. And so, therefore, we should not negotiate. This, especially that whether it's high or low, there's about productivity. If there's a lot more than productivity to this, we can develop productivity and we can improve it. But at the time, Palestinian economists' opinion was not taken, and Mass has taken the platform to show this, to showcase this. But now what we're seeing today is a result of these policies that neglected the experts' opinion and recommendation. Here I would like to talk about the land settlement. The land settlement is a project that has been ongoing for the last 7 years. It's important to re-register lands in a legal way. It's important on a legal, political aspect. However, from an economic perspective, registering the land without actually following up on the registration with including political and economic um, policies that would help moving transferring these assets from financial assets to production factors, it made the land just a commodity. So the most important role of the land now is just that it has a value as an asset, only as an asset, as a commodity, but it's not its productivity potential. So therefore, we should have included the land settlement project with economic policies that would make the land a tool for productivity rather than just an asset that is considered as a commodity to be traded. All these policies have enlarged the roles of all the non-commercial or non-tradable sectors. The non-tradable sectors are economic sectors that have developed in developing countries which have not succeeded economically, and we're one of them, which focuses on the land as an asset to be traded. It focuses on construction. It focuses on trades that could not be used for trade. So, but this does not have create employability for the citizens or residents. So, therefore, we would have we're now at this phase where we are having a larger share for non-tradable sectors. The it's there's the neoliberal policies, productivity issues, allocating less than 1% of the Palestinian Authority's budget to agriculture created the an issue, especially with the fiscal crisis that the Palestinian, or the financial crisis that the Palestinian government is facing, considering that it has ramifications and it affects our ability to invest in the future. The Authority decided not to have any control, or the lack of control over monetary policies such as the commerce. We know that what revives agriculture is not the policies that are relevant to agriculture. It's actually the commercial or trade policies. So what revives the capacity of the agricultural sector to develop and improve are those out of this sector, including the trade and we'll discuss this when we discuss the topic on how to deal with the policies in the future. The last point that I would like to touch upon in terms of challenges regarding to food security is the actual definition of food security. Food security under occupation is not complete. It's not holistic because this means it's relief, it's economic, but it's not directly linked to politics and authority or sovereignty. Being under occupation and being under the control of Israel, then we should not use tools and mechanisms that separate policies from economy, politics from economy. So we have to reintegrate it together in addition to food security and to promote food security and support it. It's one of the main economic decisions that we should take soon. As for addressing in the future, addressing the priorities for relief and rehabilitation and recovery of food security and income, there are several national plans and some UN agency plans, which are summarized in two steps. These plans propose to have the very first intervention for food security or income is to have a relief and recovery. First, we need to relieve the people and help the people overcome the current crisis. And then we're going to work on a survey in order to understand their future needs, based on which we're going to conduct interventions. Now, to briefly, what are the main interventions that we should take into consideration in the future regarding the challenges that I've discussed? The very first is relevant to the policies relevant to agriculture. We have to invest and promote investing in the agricultural sector, encouraging the farmers, providing and supporting local initiatives. There are lots of local initiatives which are economic initiatives. They're not social initiatives only that end by the end of the project. They're actually sustainable based on profit that would lead to investment by farmers. So we need to promote such initiatives, and they're actually existing. So we don't have to think about them or find them. We have to look for what's existing and what's successful and actually support it and promote it. And we also need to use Israel uses this in according to Oslo Accords. There are quotas for importing from Israel. Israel every now and then they decide to protect their economy from the Palestinian agricultural farmer who's actually more vulnerable. However, on the other hand, the most important policy in commerce or in trade is to deal with them an eye for an eye. Let's do so. So, linking the economic policies with the developmental policies and building the Palestinians' capacity to be resilient is the main or is the core of a relief in the future. And not only that, but they're also the core of foundation for future development. Using trade and commerce in reviving the agricultural sector is one of the important topics. The last one. The other topic is food sovereignty. Food security, without linking it to food sovereignty, which means ensuring that Palestinians have control over the over food and over the resources of food, and not being dependent on donors to provide food security is the basis and the core basis of developing the agricultural sector and ensuring that we have food security in the future. One of the studies that MAS has conducted is that, or according to MAS, there are more than 36 goods and commodities which are which are available locally. They are imported and with a total value of 1.5 million dollars. And if it's used locally, or if it's replaced locally, then it would definitely create new job opportunities for Palestinians. So therefore, ensuring that the local Palestinians are using locally produced products, because as we well know, when we produce something for the first time, it would be highly expensive, but then the prices would go down. We should actually push for that. And also, we have to push for BDS, and to ensure that there's boycotting and the boycott and divestment sanctions, ensuring that we support that movement to ensure that we're able to provide and to be able to attain not only food security, but also food sovereignty and reduce poverty levels. Thank you, Dr. Samia. Definitely, it's a holistic approach for this research paper, not only the vision and the strategy, but also it has several proposals and solutions, because definitely there are problems on the internal issues, and there's lots of challenges which are internal and also external. Now, I would like to welcome Professor Jomo as a commentator. He is a researcher in Columbia University, and he's also an instructor at the International University in Malaysia. Jomo, please, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Salam alaikum to all of you. I wish you well, and I wish you peace in these very, very troubling and challenging times. What we are living through, of course, is very, very dangerous for a great number of people. But I think we take the spirit of the last panel, where we discussed some of the politics of the current period and some of the challenges arising therefrom. I want to thank Dr. Samia for her paper and her presentation also. And I would like to, if I may, distinguish two parts to the presentation. Firstly, she has reminded us about the dire situation in Palestine as far as the possibilities of sustainable food agriculture are concerned. I think this enormity of this has to be looked at within a larger context. We have seen over the last decade a steady deterioration of food insecurity in the world as a whole. For the first time, for a long time, we have seen increasing numbers of people, increasing shares of the population all over the world suffering from food insecurity. This is of course very sad and very serious. And I think it's very important because it challenges us to rethink a lot of our poverty data, our information on poverty. Because as we know, poor people spend more than half their incomes on food, and often even more. So our understanding of poverty, when the World Bank tells us that the poverty is getting better, that poverty is declining, but food insecurity, according to the FAO, is getting worse. I would tend to believe the FAO much more than I would believe the bank as far as poverty versus food insecurity is concerned. And this raises very important issues about the reliability of our data and so on. But I think the third point, which of Dr. Samia's coverage, is the whole question of incomes and poverty. And here again, we have a situation where things have been getting worse in the recent period. As far as the World Bank, which has the responsibility for poverty data in the world, is concerned, they say that the situation has deteriorated, but since the pandemic. And after the pandemic is largely over, we have not seen a significant improvement. In fact, the situation in the world gets worse. So it's very important for us to recognize that the world situation is getting worse, but the situation in Palestine is far, far worse than the deterioration in the world situation. And this is something which Dr. Samia brings our attention to. She reminds us, for example, that over two-thirds of the population of Palestine have experienced food losses, water sources, which is so essential to human life, has been severely compromised. That I think her figure is 97%, and this, of course, is very troubling. The very survival of the Palestinian population in Palestine is at stake. This is important for us to understand, and it's important for us to contextualize this within the larger concerns about the strategy to eliminate the Palestinian population of Gaza, but also possibly in the West Bank as a whole. So we are seeing what is involved in the whole question of sustainable agriculture, of food security, as well as incomes, involves the whole question of the survival of the Palestinian population. This is very different, in my view, from so-called normal settler colonial situations. In other settler colonial situations, for example, in Australia, it was claimed that there was no people. Here, in the slogan of the Australians is very similar to the slogan of the Zionist settler colonialists. A land without people for a people without land. That was the slogan in Australia, and it is the slogan here. But unlike the situation in Palestine, the elimination of the Palestinian population in situ is ongoing. And this is something which is, in my view, is the crucial issue which we need to appreciate, understand. So the whole question of the food supplies and so on becomes extremely important. Now, Dr. Samia's the second part of her discussion is suggesting policy priorities for Palestine. I would normally completely endorse her recommendations, in the sense that when I was working for the United Nations and I was working for the Food and Agriculture Organization, I was completely I would be very much have a great deal of concerns about the trends in international trade, how the trends of international trade have involved the deterioration of the terms of trade against the production of agriculture versus industry. We have also seen, for example, a significant deterioration, particularly of tropical agricultural terms of trade compared with temperate agricultural terms of trade. But in the present situation, I would put less emphasis on, for example, food sovereignty. As important as I think food sovereignty is for many other societies, we have a situation where much is at stake. The very survival of food of the Palestinian population is at stake. And how do we ensure the food supplies which are needed to ensure that future generations of Palestinians not only survive, but are viable as a population going forward in these challenging times. And this is why it's not clear to me that for a relatively small territory such as Palestine, it is that food sovereignty per se should be the top priority. This is true. I've also said this, that this may not be feasible for many people, in the Via Campesina movement in many parts of Central America, especially, where the economies are relatively small. So it's important for us to contextualize this and to recognize the challenges facing food sovereignty, because I think the question of the survival of Palestine and the survival of the Palestinian people is crucial and central going forward. Now, what can be done? I think Dr. Samia talks about a number of things which are very important. And I think it is important for us to consider the possibility of weaponizing the economic relations, international economic relations, as has been led by the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. This is extremely important because for the present leadership in the world today, including the Western world, this is the only language they understand. And it is very important, for example, to begin to think about how do we ensure food supplies reach and are adequate for the Palestinian population. I would, in the very short term, for the people of Gaza and so on, I would not be averse, to use a very extreme example, which is very unlikely to happen, to ordering food supplies and payment only on delivery by a company associated with, let us say, Donald Trump or some of his friends. Because there are very few people who can actually ensure delivery of food in these times, particularly for the Palestinian population, especially in Gaza. So we need to begin to think about short-term strategies for survival as well as the medium-term strategies going forward. But we don't even know what are the conditions going forward. So very often we need to begin to think about relatively seemingly conservative strategies. How do we ensure, for example, that the property rights of Palestinians are preserved and ensured and protected? This is very crucial to the whole question, precisely because of the threat not only from the Israeli state, but also very crucially from settlers which are used as a non-legal wing of the Zionist movement. All this becomes crucial, I think, as we think about what is needed and what is necessary going forward. I have already exceeded the time which has been given to me, so allow me to stop here, Mr. Chairman. But let me emphasize that I have nothing to do with Columbia University anymore. I live and work in Malaysia, and the people of Malaysia are in solidarity with the struggle of the people of Palestine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. This is from heart to heart. Thank you very much. الأسئلة
Questions?
direct على الموضوع. دكتور طارق عاشور.
Dr. Tariq Ashur. Thank you, Dr. Samia. It's actually important. I would like to highlight 2 points linked to
since we speak of making smart policies, crime can be an opportunity. Crime in the 1960s, we had 2 academies of agriculture in Al-Arub and Al-Kharuri. Al-Arub Academy became a media academy, and Khaduri became a university that teaches engineering. Our conflict over land and the development of the agricultural sector lacks smart policies, because agriculture is not only seeds that are planted and irrigated to have food. It depends on genetic engineering, smart farming, and aqua farming, and other forms of new techniques. Israel has been aware of the importance of this point and have exploited this politically and economically, whether it be in Israel or in other countries. But we forgot this area. Now we have a shift of Palestinian genetic experts, but we all go to human genetics. But we have never considered the smart policies that encourage investment in the development of seeds, the agri-engineering. If we speak of agricultural policy, we bring the seeds from Israel. The fertilizers will come from Israel. The techniques will come from Israel. So what are we speaking of? Probably 10 years ago, in a conference of the National Israeli Council, they said that the industries that need donkey work shall be left to the Palestinians, including agriculture. And the yield of this investment will go inside the green line. But here, unfortunately, we're still speaking of simple agricultural investment, and we do not pay attention to smart policies, especially in the area of agriculture. Mr. Sa'il Lord, thank you. I am not an expert of agriculture, but if every Palestinian citizen plants one 2x2 garden, it will be not only sufficient, we will be able to eat or grow our own food, or we can maybe have chicken or why do consumers buy other countries' product? Because it doesn't exist. Why was the price of vegetables higher before? I know they have lack of agriculture farming workers. We have land. We have brains. So we need to focus on agriculture. Without agriculture, there is no industry, there is no economy, there is no state. Thank you, Mr. Salah Hania. Thank you very much for this valuable paper. I agree with everything that was mentioned here. I have a long comment. Thank you for this paper. I agree with all the points mentioned here, especially regarding replacing imports. But we need to focus on an important issue, which you mentioned, which is trading policies. Because the current situation does not help Palestinian farmers. As an economic investor, yesterday the Ministry of Agriculture said we want to prevent importation of certain Israeli avocado because we want to promote the local products. But the consumers objected to that because they prefer that Israeli type. So the agricultural middlemen who raise prices of products, farmers do not make profit, but the traders make this profit, the brokers. Palestinian potato is sold at the same time with the settlements potato. There's a lot of potatoes in Tubas in northern Jordan Valley and so on, and it doesn't appear on the market. I believe that after this conference, you need to focus on trading policy and protecting the agricultural sector. Thank you, Dr. Ziad Darwish. Thank you. The first point, our view of the land has changed. Our view of the land has changed. And the second point, which is important, our problem is in the details. We need a lot of dynamics and flexibility. We need implementation. So make it closer to your minds. A simple farmer. We are simple farmers. We are villages, towns, and small cities. We face problems with settlers and other problems. But for us as Palestinian farmers or as a local agricultural community, we are surrounded from three areas. There is the Ministry of Agriculture, there is the Ministry of Local Government, and the Ministry of Village or Local Councils. Because these councils do not have flexibility. They apply the decisions of the Ministry of Local Government, which issues decision based on the decisions of the central government. It's an office-made policy. We need something practical on the ground. So this is our problem. Thank you. Mr. Isa Faraj from Amman. Lamis Faraj from Amman. I'm Lamis Faraj from Amman Coalition. I'm very happy with this paper that you presented, and I agree that there is a huge difference between food security and food sovereignty. But the literature of the PNA keeps speaking of food security. And the diagnosis you presented with the deterioration of interest in the agricultural sector and its share of the GDP. This diagnosis has always existed, as you said, and the government realizes it, and the challenges you mentioned are also known. So why isn't there a trend or an approach? Is there any approach to support the agricultural sector or to implement the recommendations you mentioned or to have policies? Because this has been discussed for many years, even before the war and during COVID. We have seen how we lived in a state of deterioration, and previously mentioned diagnosis on how we deal with the budget and that we increase revenues through the clearing funds. So this is why we're importing more. So we keep a vicious cycle of this crisis without proposing a solution. Why isn't there a remedy? Is there a will to have this kind of remedy, or may I consider it as a systematic policy? It's not that we don't know. It happened because this is what we want and that we're part of the problem as a government. Thank you, Lamis. Mr. Jamil from Ministry of Labor. We will not be able, the last one will be Dr. Mahmoud. We apologize for other participants. They like your paper, Dr. Samia. Mr. Jamal from Ministry of Labor, so thank you. We view the agricultural sector as an employer, not only for individual workers, but also at the household level. Through the diagnosis and by learning the problems that impede or hinder the development of the agricultural sector to achieve food security and sovereignty, I believe that there are local issues. For example, the question of property of land. When they started to have land settlement, we could register land owned by 150 people. And at the same time, the land could be inherited and parceled. So in addition to this, there could be an increase of population. People started to buy and sell land because Ramallah, for example, 20 or 30 years ago is not like Ramallah today. There is also a shrinking of the area of the land. Area C is being exacerbated by settlement, and settlement controls 60% of the Palestinian land. Last question, Dr. Mahmoud Abu Rob, and then we give the floor to Dr. Samia and to Dr. George, and then we conclude. To go back to the agricultural sector, we will be solving two problems. First, we have part of our food security, and we will consolidate the resilience and steadfastness of our citizens and protect the land. Under this reality, as you mentioned, Dr. Samia, maybe we can add, or if you can comment on how we can have a sustainable return of agriculture to be able to fulfill food security, protect the land, and have a local value added of Palestinian products that does not remain low as now. So how can we increase the local value added of our agricultural products? Dr. Samia? Very briefly, the objective of the paper was that we have different policy choices at the micro and macro levels and at the level of interventions from other policies. So in general, to promote the agricultural sector, three parties must intervene. We need to encourage farmers to farm. It's not by pushing them. They work. They need to be encouraged. There must be promotion. There must be contributions for the production of local fertilizers or to produce local agricultural products. There are local initiatives. Our role in the area of policies is to support this kind of initiatives and provide them with the necessary capacities to become economically feasible and implementable. At the population level, we have a responsibility as consumers. It is not possible to ask for the consumption of Israeli products, especially under the current situation. Our responsibility is to start consuming the local products, even if the price is higher. This is how industries develop. Any economic sector, look at the Palestinian pharmaceutical sector and how it developed. It developed from this perspective. First, it was costly production. It was not with the appropriate equality. It was with increased local demand and opening of the markets. The pharmaceutical sectors became able to develop, and this is the route for any economic sector in the world. It is not something that we have invented. So it is a role that can be played by the farmers, a role that the authority can play, and a role that consumers can play. Therefore, we said that at different levels, there's also the role of boycott, which is very important, not only for the political level, but also economic level. All of these policies can regenerate production and maximize productivity in the agricultural sector. The importance of the agricultural sector, as you mentioned, it is linked to food security and food sovereignty. And therefore, it's not only an economic issue, but it is also something that leads to strengthening the capacity of Palestinians not only to steadfastness, but also to resistance. Without maximizing our capacity to resistance, none of our economies, agricultural or industrial, will be developed. So if we do not gear all our economic capacities toward maximizing resistance, economic resistance of Israel, we won't have any role or important role of any economic sector. Thank you. Professor Jomo.
Appreciate it. Please, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would like to emphasize the political aspect of the. I would like to emphasize the political aspect because it has been very crucial in contemporary famines. If we look, for example, at what happened in Somalia about 14 years ago, there was a famine in Somalia where between 200,000 to 300,000 people died. This is almost nobody talks about it because nobody cares about what happens in Somalia. The famine was actually quite deliberate. It was due to the fact that the World Food Programme would not deliver food to Al-Shabaab, to the Somalian people, because of the possibility that some of it would be confiscated by Al-Shabaab. I think we are living in extraordinary times. The situation to expect to return to agriculture as if we do not have the kinds of constraints which we have today, I think is not very realistic. That's why I think Dr. Samia's paper is well worth looking at. The details she describes in terms of what has happened with jobs, what has the number of people who are without jobs in Palestine, high proportion, of course, in Gaza, but also elsewhere. The number of people the amount of land which is no longer tillable, the number of orchard trees which are no longer reachable. In my one visit, which I made to Palestine a dozen years ago, I spent a day with a farmer. The farmer was waiting for 40 minutes for the gates to open for him to go and access his land. This was at 9:40 in the morning. He had to return by 4 o'clock because that was the gates would open again at 4 o'clock. He waited about 20 minutes and finally was allowed to. This is the hottest time of the day for the farmer, but because the farmer had no choice. So I think it is very important for us to recognize that for many farmers in Palestine, as well as especially in Palestine, it is not possible to farm as if in so-called normal conditions. We need to begin to think very seriously about how do we serve the interests of the Palestinian people in terms of their food needs, to have as healthy diets as possible, and also to ensure that this is viable for them, and that they also have incomes which will allow them to survive. This, I think, is not a situation where it is possible to go back to a status quo ante, but we need to look forward and we need to begin to devise policies for food security as well as for agriculture, which will be able to ensure the advancement of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian people. Thank you very much for this opportunity.